Rain swallowed the mountain road, a silver curtain hissing against the windshield. He leaned forward, squinting through the blur, the wipers thrashing uselessly. The world ahead was only darkness and water, until the headlights caught a shimmer, the brief outline of something pale darting across the lane. Instinct jerked his hands on the wheel. Tires shrieked. The guardrail flashed past. For one breathless instant he saw the valley yawning below. Then gravity took him. Metal twisted, glass exploded, and the roar of the storm became a single, endless scream. When the car finally struck earth, silence dropped like a weight. Steam hissed from the broken hood. He lay slumped across the seatbelt, dazed, tasting blood and smoke. He didn't know how long he drifted before the cold woke him. The rain had thinned to a mist. Every nerve in his body hurt, but he managed to shove the door open and drag himself out. The slope was littered with stones and torn roots. The car lay on its side like some great wounded beast. He should have called for help, but his phone was gone, lost in the wreck. Instead, there was only the forest, breathing quietly around him. Then, somewhere beyond the wreckage, the ground gave a low, pulsing tremor. Once. Twice. As if a heart was beating beneath the soil. He turned, limping toward it. The trees leaned close, whispering with wet leaves. At the center of a small clearing, half buried in moss, stood an old stone marker. Cracks ran through it like lightning scars, and from those cracks seeped a faint light, a greenish shimmer that brightened with each throb of the earth. He took another step. The light flared. The soil split open. Vines erupted, whipping upward through the rain. They coiled and braided together until they formed the silhouette of a woman, slender, upright, her hair flowing as if under water. Mud slid from her skin. The glow dimmed, leaving a figure pale as moonlight, eyes still closed. He staggered backward, tripping over a root. Then her lashes lifted. Those eyes were not human. They were silver, ancient, endless. When she spoke, her voice was low and even, each word carrying the calm of someone who had slept a very long time. "You woke me." He could not move. His throat worked, but no sound came. She stepped closer, bare feet leaving faint prints that glimmered before fading. The vines around her wrists tightened and melted into her skin. "Who are you?" he whispered. "You pulled me from death," she said. "That makes you mine." A tendril of green slid from the ground, wrapping around his wrist. The chill of it shot up his arm like ice water. He struggled, but the vine held firm until she raised one delicate finger. At her gesture, it loosened, sinking back into the mud. She studied him for a long moment, expression unreadable. "Strange," she murmured, glancing toward the distant road lights. "The world has changed." He swallowed hard. "Please, I need help. I'm injured." "You will live," she replied simply. "I need you alive." The words carried no warmth, yet they steadied him more than he expected. He pressed a hand to his ribs, forcing breath into his lungs. "What do you want from me?" Her gaze returned to him, quiet, assessing. "Obedience." Something in him almost laughed, some fragile part that refused to believe this was real. But her eyes made the sound die in his throat. She looked down at herself then, at the remnants of mud and vines still clinging to her. "Clothes," she said, "and a place to rest." He nodded automatically. There's an old cabin near the trail. It's not far. Take me there." It wasn't a request. He turned toward the path, and she followed soundlessly behind. The rain had stopped, leaving the night heavy with the scent of earth and pine. As they climbed, he glanced back once. She moved with unnatural grace, as if her feet barely touched the ground, the hem of her white gown never catching on stones or roots. When they reached the ridge, city lights flickered far below, small, trembling stars against the black. She paused, eyes reflecting them. "So bright," she said softly. "The heavens have fallen." He didn't answer. He couldn't. His mind still struggled to place her among the things he knew: woman, ghost, hallucination. But none of those words fit. The cabin waited where he remembered, half hidden under cedar branches, its windows long broken, its door hanging crooked. She stepped inside first, gliding past him. Dust swirled around her as she touched the table, the chair, the cracked mirror on the wall, each object coming alive under her fingers, colors sharpening, surfaces gleaming faintly as if renewed by her presence. "This will do," she said. He lowered himself onto a splintered stool, every muscle shaking. You can stay here. I'll find someone." Her gaze cut him short. "No one must know I live." The quiet authority in her tone silenced any protest. He nodded again, looking down at his trembling hands. Outside, the rain began anew, soft as whispers. Inside, the air thickened with something he couldn't name, like the scent of new leaves after fire. She turned to him once more. "You fear me." He met her eyes and found no cruelty there, only certainty. "Shouldn't I?" "Perhaps." She tilted her head as if considering him. "But fear is a kind of respect. Keep it." He gave a small, hollow laugh. "You talk like you expect me to stay." "I do." Her voice was calm. "You owe me your life." He wanted to argue, to tell her he owed her nothing, but she raised one hand and the argument died before reaching his lips. The air itself seemed to hush when she moved. "Rest," she said. "At dawn, we will go into your world." He hesitated. "You don't even know my name." She regarded him for a heartbeat, then answered, "Names are fragile things. Keep yours until I ask for it." "And yours?" he asked quietly. For the first time, something faint, almost a smile, touched her lips. Si Tang. The name settled between them like the echo of a bell. She turned away, her figure melting into shadow, and he was left staring at the faint glow where the vines had retreated into the floorboards. He didn't remember falling asleep, only that exhaustion finally overcame fear. When dawn crept through the broken window, the cabin was silent. The corner where she had stood was empty, but the faint pattern of vine marks coiled across the floor, still damp, still alive. He shivered, realizing she was real, and somewhere near. Outside, the forest waited. The world changed, and the debt she spoke of had already begun to root itself in him. Dawn bled softly across the forest, pouring its pale gold through the mist. The air still hummed with the quiet ache of the night before, where death and miracle had danced in the same breath. He woke first. His body throbbed with dull pain, his mind foggy from shock. When he tried to move, the ground's cold fingers clawed against his back, and he winced. Then he remembered. The vines, the voice, the woman rising from earth itself. She stood a few paces away, barefoot in the dewy grass, gazing toward the first light like it had betrayed her once. Her long, dark hair clung to the fabric of a coat that looked far too fine for someone found buried in soil. For a moment, he only watched her, unsure if she was real or another fever dream. Then she spoke. "You breathe too loudly," she said without turning. "Are you afraid I'll vanish if you blink?" The sound of her voice drew him upright. You were buried. He stopped himself. What could he even say? I hit a tree and freed a ghost? Finally, she turned. Morning sunlight kissed her cheekbones, sharpening every line of her face until she looked like something carved, not born. "You freed me," she said, her tone a strange mix of acknowledgement and warning. "But do not mistake that for ownership." He swallowed, his throat dry. "I wasn't trying to—" "You bled on my roots," she interrupted. "You disturbed my rest. Now your life belongs to me." The words fell cold and final. He took a cautious step back, but her eyes, sharp, green, alive with something ancient, held him still. "You're joking," he said, trying to mask fear with a shaky laugh. "Do I look like someone who jokes?" Her gaze swept over him, deliberate, assessing. Then, almost cruelly, she smiled, a slow, predatory curve. "You reek of confusion. Tell me, what year is it?" 2024. The answer made her brows tighten slightly. "So long," she murmured. "They really thought they could bury me forever." "Who are they?" he asked. She ignored the question, brushing dirt off her sleeve as if centuries of sleep were just dust to be shaken away. "What's your name?" she asked instead. He hesitated, sensing that giving her his name felt like handing over a weapon. "Qin Fang." "Qin Fang," she repeated, tasting it like a rare fruit. "You will serve me, Qin Fang." "Serve you?" Her eyes glimmered dangerously. "Do you think I ask?" The air seemed to shift. Around them, thorned vines stirred at her feet, alive, eager, obeying. One lashed out, brushing the side of his neck. He froze. "Every drop of my power demands balance," she said softly. "You brought me back, and I will not waste the life I borrowed." "What are you?" he whispered. Her lips curved again, though the smile didn't reach her eyes. "Something your kind tried to destroy. I am Si Teng, last of the vine spirits. Your world forgot me, but it will remember soon." The vines retracted slowly, disappearing into the soil as if bowing to her. He should have run. Every instinct screamed for it. But there was something magnetic about her, an invisible pull he couldn't resist. Maybe it was guilt, maybe awe, maybe the strange flicker of beauty beneath her cruelty. "You look at me like a man who wants to understand," she said. "That will be your downfall." She turned and began walking through the forest, her movements graceful, regal even. When she noticed he hadn't followed, she glanced back. "Come, or do you plan to die here alone?" He followed. He didn't know why. As they walked, the forest seemed to part for her, branches bending, thorns withdrawing, mist curling like silk at her feet. "How long were you—" he started. "Asleep?" She gave a humorless laugh. "Long enough to forget what warmth felt like." "And now—" She stopped suddenly and faced him. "Now, I remember, and I will never let them bury me again." There was steel in her voice, but also pain. For a fleeting second he saw something human, loneliness, maybe even longing, before she covered it again with pride. "You don't have to—" "Silence," she cut in sharply. "Do not pretend concern. You will not understand my pain nor my purpose." But when she turned again, he caught a glimpse of her hand trembling. They emerged onto a quiet road that cut through the edge of the forest. His car was a wreck, a broken skeleton of twisted metal. Steam rose from the hood. He sighed. "It's ruined." "Machines," she said flatly. "Always fragile?" She moved closer, her steps soundless. "You owe me your life. Do not forget it." "I didn't ask to owe you anything." Her eyes flared with something between anger and amusement. Mortals rarely ask before falling into chains. She leaned in slightly, close enough for him to catch the faint scent of wild roses and rain. "But I could make your life worth keeping." When the conductor approached for fares, Qin Fang stiffened. He had no money. Before he could stammer an excuse, Si Teng looked up. "You'll take us where we need to go," she said quietly. The man's eyes glazed for a second. "Of course, miss," he muttered and moved on. Qin Fang leaned closer. "You can't keep doing that." "Doing what?" "Controlling people." She turned to him, her voice soft but edged. "You control the earth with your machines, the sky with your smoke, and each other with lies. Don't lecture me on control." He looked away, defeated. Outside, the landscape rolled by, fields and rivers flashing beneath the sun. At one point, the bus jolted to a stop near a gas station. Si Teng's attention sharpened. She was staring at a billboard. On it, a model smiled in a green dress strikingly similar to the one she'd worn centuries ago. "What is that?" she asked. "An advertisement," he said. "They pay people to show clothes." Her voice dropped. "They mock me." It's just fashion, not mockery." Her expression darkened. The grass near the roadside began to ripple unnaturally, vines coiling beneath the soil. "Hey," he whispered urgently, touching her arm. "Don't." The word, gentle yet steady, cut through her rising fury. She blinked, and the vines stilled. Her eyes met his, storm meeting calm. Something shifted in that glance, something wordless and human. "You have courage," she said quietly. "Or foolishness. Sometimes they are the same." He smiled faintly. "Guess we'll find out?" The bus rolled on. By late afternoon they arrived at another town. Larger, busier, neon lights already flickering to life. Siteng stepped off first, inhaling deeply. The city air was thick with electricity, oil, and human noise. "It's ugly," she murmured. "It's home," he said. They walked along the crowded street. People moved around them like water, glancing at Siteng's strange composure, her eyes too sharp, her posture too perfect. She didn't belong, and yet somehow the world bent around her presence. They stopped by a shop window. Inside, mannequins stood dressed in the latest styles. Siteng tilted her head. "They mimic life," she said. "Soulless figures dressed to please." He chuckled. "Sounds like most people." For a moment her lips curved, the smallest ghost of a smile. Then, across the street, a group of men started arguing near a car. One shoved another hard, the other drew a knife. Qin Fang tensed, ready to intervene, but Siteng raised a hand. "Watch," she said. The man with the knife froze mid-motion. His fingers slackened and the blade clattered to the ground. The others backed away, confused, frightened. The wind swirled once and stilled. The fight was over before it began. She turned back to Qin Fang. "Power keeps chaos in line." He stared at her amazed. "You stopped him." "I reminded the blood in his veins who rules the earth beneath his feet." "That's terrifying," he admitted. "Then you finally understand me." They walked again in silence, but the space between them felt charged, alive with something dangerous and magnetic. As dusk fell, they found shelter in an abandoned house on the town's edge. Dust motes hung in the fading light. She sat by the window, eyes on the horizon. "Do you ever feel lonely?" he asked quietly. Her voice came soft. "Loneliness is a luxury of the living. You're alive now." She turned to him. "Am I?" The question lingered, heavy and haunting. He didn't answer. Instead, he reached out and handed her his jacket. "You'll be cold." She looked at it, then at him. For a long moment, she said nothing. Finally, she took it, draping it over her shoulders. "You should not care for me, Qin Fang." "Too late," he said simply. Something flickered in her eyes. Fear, perhaps, or memory. "Care becomes weakness." "Or strength," he murmured. They sat in silence after that, the night humming softly outside. Somewhere in the distance, thunder grumbled. And in the dim light of that forgotten room, Siteng, mistress of thorns, allowed herself a single human breath, a sigh that tasted of sorrow and something dangerously close to tenderness. Morning came gray and wet. Rain drummed softly on the roof, dripping through cracks in the beams. The abandoned house felt colder than the night before, as if the world itself recoiled from what it sheltered. Qin Fang stirred first. The fire they'd made had died to ash, and Siteng sat where she'd been all night, by the window, unmoving, her gaze fixed on the rain. She looked carved from moonlight. "You didn't sleep," he said quietly. "I don't need to," she answered. "Dreams are for those who forget." He rubbed his hands together, shivering. "And what do you remember?" "Everything." Her voice was distant, like the rain beyond the glass. "The soil where I was buried, the roots that wrapped around me, waiting, the last breath of the one who betrayed me." He hesitated. "Do you ever wish you could forget?" She turned, and something flickered in her eyes. Grief, maybe even guilt. Sometimes. But forgetting is another kind of death. He didn't press further. Instead, he rose and walked to the door. I'll find something to eat. You should rest, even if you don't need to. Her lips curved faintly. You give orders now? Suggestions, he said, smiling a little. She watched him leave, her gaze lingering longer than she meant to. When the door closed, Si-Teng exhaled slowly and ran her hand along the wall. Vines crept out of the cracks following her touch, alive, answering her. They formed patterns across the old wood, curling like script from another world. Still loyal, she murmured, even after centuries. Outside, Yinfang walked through the muddy streets. The town was stirring awake, children running under umbrellas, vendors shouting through the drizzle. Everything looked normal, yet he couldn't shake the sense that something unseen pulsed beneath it, something following him. He bought steamed buns from a vendor, his mind replaying the events of the last 2 days. A car crash, a spirit reborn, the world quietly bending around her. It all sounded insane, and yet she was real. He could still smell her scent on his jacket. Wild roses and rain. When he returned, she was standing in the doorway, watching the street. You took your time, she said. Had to wait for them to cook, he replied, handing her one of the buns. Try it. It's good. She looked at it suspiciously. It's soft. That's the point. She took a tentative bite, her expression unreadable. Then, quietly, it's warm. He grinned. You sound surprised. I forgot warmth could come from food, she said softly, not just from blood. That startled him. He studied her, trying to decide if she was joking. She wasn't. After breakfast, they walked toward the heart of a town. The rain had thinned to mist. Si-Teng's eyes darted from cars to neon signs, from flashing screens to the hum of electricity. Every sound seemed to fascinate and offend her at once. Your world reeks of restlessness, she said. So much motion, so little meaning. You'll get used to it, he offered. I don't intend to. They stopped at a bookstore. She paused at the window, staring at a poster of a fantasy novel, its cover showing a woman surrounded by thorned vines. Your stories remember me, she whispered. Maybe, he said carefully. Or maybe they just imagine things like you. She looked at him. Then, imagination is a kind of memory. He didn't argue. There was no winning debates with her, only surviving them. By noon, they reached the town's busier district. Si-Teng's presence drew eyes. Even the noise seemed to dim around her. A group of students slowed to stare. A woman nearly dropped her shopping bag. She moved like someone from a different century, and everyone felt it. People are looking, he murmured. They should, she replied. I'm worth looking at. He shook his head, half amused. You don't do modesty, do you? Modesty is for the uncertain. They were about to cross the street when she suddenly stopped. Her eyes narrowed. Someone's watching us. Yinfang followed her gaze but saw nothing. Where? She didn't answer. Her hand brushed against his arm. Light, deliberate. Stay close. For a moment, the air thickened. The world around them blurred, colors bleeding into shadow. Then, just as suddenly, it snapped back to normal. What was that? He gasped. A veil, she said quietly. Someone tried to glimpse me through a charm. They'll try again. He frowned. Who? My hunters. The bloodline that buried me may have withered, but their oaths remain. So, we're not safe? She gave a small, humorless laugh. Safety is an illusion, but I can protect you, as long as you remain mine. The way she said it sent a shiver down his spine. It wasn't just a warning, it was a vow. They took shelter in a small tea shop. The air inside was warm, scented with jasmine. Si-Teng chose a corner table, her posture regal even on a worn wooden chair. The waitress arrived, smiling nervously. What can I get you? Si-Teng looked up. Tea. Fresh leaves, not the dust you call flavor. Of course. Qinfang leaned closer, whispering, "You might try being polite." "I was," she said. "I didn't kill her." He sighed. "That's not how politeness works." She studied him for a long moment, her eyes softening slightly. "You speak as if the world owes you kindness. It doesn't." "Maybe," he said, "but we can still give it." Her gaze lingered on him, thoughtful, almost tender. Then she looked away. "You are a strange man, Qinfang. From you, I'll take that as a compliment." When the tea arrived, she inhaled the steam, her lashes lowering. "This scent," she murmured. "It's like spring in a memory." He smiled. "You remember spring?" "I remember everything that grows," she said softly. "Every leaf, every root, every death." The quiet between them deepened, not awkward but charged with something fragile. The sound of rain returned, tapping gently against the window. Then her expression changed. Her hand tightened around the cup. "They're close." He froze. "Who?" She stood. "Hunters." Outside, 3 men in dark coats crossed the street toward the shop, their steps measured, deliberate. Sitang's eyes darkened, the air around her stirring like a storm held in glass. Qinfang's heart pounded. "What do we do?" She smiled, slow, dangerous, beautiful. "You run if I fall, but I don't intend to fall." And before he could speak, the vines beneath the floorboards began to move. At first, Qinfang thought it was the tremor of passing trucks, but then the wood itself shuddered, splitting hairline cracks across its surface. Tendrils of green slipped through, glistening with dew that hadn't been there a heartbeat ago. They coiled like serpents, twisting toward the door. Sitang rose slowly, her eyes half-lidded, her voice soft as silk. "Let them come." The shopkeeper's porcelain cups rattled on their tray. The waitress, pale and trembling, backed away until her apron brushed the counter. Qinfang's instincts screamed at him to pull Sitang out of there, but one look at her face told him she wasn't planning to retreat. The first man pushed open the door. Rain haloed him in silver. His eyes were old, too old for his face, and around his wrist hung a charm carved from bone. Behind him, 2 others followed, each carrying the same faint aura of something that didn't belong in this century. "Sitang," the leader said, voice low but steady. "The world moved on without you. You should have stayed buried." Her lips curved faintly. "And deny it, my beauty?" His jaw tightened. "You were judged once. Will not make the same mistake of mercy." She stepped forward, every inch the queen she had been centuries ago. "Mercy," she repeated, "a word men use when they're too weak to finish what they start." The vines struck first. They burst from the floor in a storm of green, wrapping around chair legs, snapping through the air. One man dodged, drawing a talisman that flared with red light, burning through a vine like acid. The others chanted under their breath, symbols flaring across their palms. Qinfang ducked behind the counter as splinters flew. "Sitang!" "Stay down," she commanded. He peeked over the edge, just long enough to see her raise her hand. The vines thickened, their tips blooming into roses black as night. The scent was sweet and suffocating. Each petal shimmered before hardening into thorns that shot forward like blades. One of the hunters screamed as the thorns pierced his arm, pinning him to the wall. The others fell back, circling her. The air around them rippled with old magic, echoes of the past colliding with neon light and humming wires. "You've grown weaker," one hissed. "Perhaps," she said, "but you've grown careless." She flicked her wrist and the ground itself responded. The wooden floor split apart, swallowing another man up to his chest before sealing shut. His charm flared once, then went dark. The leader lunged, his hand glowing crimson as he hurled a sigil straight at her chest. It struck, and she staggered, just a little. Qinfang saw smoke rise from her sleeve, smelled burnt silk, "Si Tang!" he shouted again. Her head turned slightly. Their eyes met. For a moment, he saw something raw, pain, not from the wound, but from memory. Then she smiled. The vines surged again, crushing the last hunter's charm in his grip. He gasped, choked, and went still. When it was over, the shop was a ruin of overturned tables and dripping stems. Rain fell through holes in the roof. Si Tang swayed, catching herself against a pillar. The vines receded, curling back into the cracks like loyal beasts returning to their den. Qin Fang ran to her side. "You're bleeding." She looked down at the scorch on her arm, unconcerned. "It's nothing." "It's not nothing," he said, reaching for her. His fingers brushed her sleeve before she could pull away. Her skin beneath was cold, yet pulsing faintly, like sap instead of blood. Her eyes flicked to his hand, then to his face. "You shouldn't touch me." "Why?" "Because you might start to care," she whispered. He froze. "Maybe I already do." Something trembled in her gaze, then vanished. "Foolish boy," she murmured, but her voice lacked venom. "Come, we can't stay." They slipped out through the back alley. The rain had stopped, leaving the world washed clean. Steam rose from the wet pavement, blurring the glow of streetlights. She moved quickly, barefoot and silent, her torn sleeve fluttering like a ghost's wing. "Where will we go?" he asked. "Somewhere old," she said, "where roots still remember my name." They walked until the town gave way to hills. Night deepened, heavy with mist. When they finally stopped, it was before a crumbling shrine overgrown with ivy. Si Tang traced the carvings on the stone gate with her fingertips. "I was born in a place like this," she said. "Once people left offerings here. Now they leave trash." Qin Fang set down the small lantern he'd found in the shop. Its light flickered weakly against the dark. "Why do they hunt you?" "For what I am," she said. "For what they fear." "Then why spare them? You could have killed all three easily." She looked at him, eyes glinting. "You think I didn't?" He swallowed hard. "I saw you stop before the last blow." Her gaze softened, almost wistful. "Perhaps mercy isn't as dead as I thought." Silence stretched between them. Wind rustled through the ivy. Finally, she sank to the ground, leaning against the shrine wall. "Sleep," she said. "You'll need your strength." He sat a few feet away, watching her. "And you?" "I'll listen to the earth. It still tells me secrets." "Si Tang?" She turned her head slightly. "Back there, when you said I shouldn't care, was that a warning or a wish?" Her lips curved faintly. "Both." He lay back, staring at the fog-shrouded stars. Somewhere beneath the soil, the vines shifted softly as if breathing with them. For a long time, neither spoke. At last, Si Tang whispered into the night, "The pact is made. You are bound to me now, Qin Fang, until the last root dies." And though he didn't understand what she meant, he felt it. A quiet tether tightening between their hearts, unseen but undeniable. Dawn slid softly through the mist. A thin light filtered across the ruined shrine, gilding the ivy with silver. Qin Fang woke first. For a heartbeat he forgot where he was, until he saw Si Tang. She was kneeling before the shrine, her hair loose, her palms pressed to the earth. The vines around the stones quivered as if breathing with her. Tiny buds opened, spilling dew like tears. He sat up. "You've been awake all night again." Her eyes opened slowly. "The earth remembers more than sleep could ever teach me." He noticed then that the burn on her arm was gone. The skin was flawless, pale as new moonlight. "You're healed." "I told you the earth keeps its promises," she said. "When roots feed on life, they return it." He hesitated. "On life? You mean—" "Not yours," she interrupted gently. "You're under my protection. The bond forbids harm between us." He frowned. "Bond? You mean that pact you mentioned last night?" What does it actually do to me? She looked at him for a long time before answering. It ties our lives. When I draw on the earth, I also draw on the spark that anchors you. If I fall, you fall. If you die, I return to dust. The words landed like stones in his chest. So I'm your shield and your chain. Her mouth curved faintly. And my witness. Don't sound so tragic, Qin Fang. There are worse fates than being needed. He wanted to be angry, but the quiet pride in her voice disarmed him. He studied her face, the sharp grace of it, the faint sadness that lived in the corners of her eyes. You didn't have to tie me to you. I did, she said simply. You brought me back. You made yourself part of the old law. He rubbed the back of his neck. Then maybe we can find a way to break it. Perhaps, she said, rising. But every pact demands a price. We should know what it is before trying to undo it. They walked down the hillside after sunrise. The world seemed cleaner after the storm. Wet fields, glittering leaves, birds singing as if nothing had happened. Yet the weight of the night followed them like a second shadow. At the edge of the road, Siteng paused. Her expression darkened. Something stirs, she murmured. The hunter's death called an echo. Someone older heard it. Qin Fang tensed. Older than them? She nodded. The true root of their order, the one who bound me. If he still breathes, he'll come himself this time. He clenched his fists. Then we'll face him together. Her eyes flicked toward him, almost amused. We, she repeated softly. So certain of your place beside me? I made a promise too, he said, even if I didn't mean to. Her gaze lingered, then softened. You are a strange man, Qin Fang. The world forgot loyalty like yours centuries ago. They reached a river before noon. Mist drifted above the water, and on the opposite bank stood the ruins of an old temple, half swallowed by forest. Siteng stopped, her breath catching. This place, she whispered. This is where I died. Qin Fang looked across the water. You sure? She nodded. The stones, remember. He touched her arm. Then maybe the answers you need are still there. For the first time, she didn't pull away from his touch. The contact was light, brief, but it lingered like warmth in winter air. Perhaps, she said quietly, but the truth buried here may not forgive me. The storm had passed, but the air still hummed with its ghost. Deep in the forest, the path to the old temple wound like a scar through the mist. The trees leaned inward, whispering secrets to the fog, and every step they took seemed to echo with memories neither could quite name. Qin Fang walked behind Siteng, his flashlight trembling slightly. She didn't need light. Her presence alone made the darkness shy away. Draped in white silk that seemed to float rather than cling, she moved like a spirit in her own kingdom. You've brought me here again, he murmured. Why this place? Her voice was soft, but it carried a strange gravity. Because this is where I died. He froze. The beam of light wavered and landed on the temple gates. Ancient wood, carved with runes that pulsed faintly beneath layers of moss. Siteng turned, her eyes meeting his, not with pain but with calm acceptance. I was betrayed here, she continued, by the man who swore to protect me. He loved me once, then feared me. Qin Fang's breath caught. He killed you? She smiled faintly. No, fear did, and love turned into something sharper. A gust of wind rushed through the corridor, stirring the dead leaves into a frantic dance. The air thickened, charged with the same energy that had haunted his dreams. Shadows began to move along the temple walls, forming faces, forms, whispers of the past. Siteng, he said, stepping closer, why show me this? Because the past is returning. Her eyes glowed faintly like embers under ice. The one who ended me has awakened again. The pact we made binds you to my fate and to my vengeance. The shadows converged and a low growl rose from the earth. A figure emerged from the mist, Tall, cloaked, eyes burning red like dying coals. Qin Fang felt his blood turn to ice. "That's him," Siteng whispered, "the one who calls himself immortal." The man's voice was deep, ancient, and cold. "You should have stayed dead, Siteng." She didn't flinch. Her lips curved slightly. "You should have stayed forgotten." Lightning flashed, not from the sky but from her hand. The ground cracked. The forest shuddered. Qin Fang stumbled backward as power erupted between them, light and shadow clashing like gods reborn. But amid the chaos, he saw her look at him, not as a weapon, but as something fragile, almost human. "If I fall," she said softly, "you must run." He shook his head. "No. If you fall, I fall too." The world exploded into white. The light faded. Smoke coiled through the broken temple like breath from a wounded god. Qin Fang coughed, searching through the haze. The air burned his lungs, but the silence was worse. "Siteng." No answer, only the whisper of dying embers. Then, a flicker, a glow from the center of the hall. She was kneeling, hair disheveled, her once bright robes now streaked with ash and blood. Yet her eyes still held that fierce, cold flame. The man who had killed her once stood only a few feet away, his cloak shredded, his face pale as bone. "You don't learn," he spat. "Even death couldn't teach you surrender." Siteng rose slowly, each movement deliberate, her power rippling faintly through the air. "Death taught me everything," she said, "including how to end you." He laughed, low and cruel. "You can't destroy what's already eternal." "I can," she whispered, "if I burn bright enough." Qin Fang stumbled to her side, grabbing her arm. "Stop! You're not strong enough. You'll kill yourself." She turned to him, her hand brushing his cheek, soft, fleeting, like a goodbye. "I was never meant to live forever," she murmured. "But you were meant to remember." Something inside him broke. "No." Before he could finish, she stepped forward. The ground beneath them trembled and light erupted from her palms. Gold, fierce, alive, wrapped around her body like fire, spiraling upward until it split the night open. The immortal man screamed as the light pierced through him, tearing away centuries of darkness. His body dissolved into dust, swallowed by the collapsing temple walls. And then, silence. When the dust finally settled, Qin Fang stood alone. The air was still, the moonlight pale and cruel above him. Where Siteng had stood was nothing but a faint shimmer, a trace of her essence lingering like a scent that refused to fade. He knelt, his fingers brushing the ground where her footprints had been. A whisper lingered, faint, melodic, inside his mind. "Do not grieve. I am part of the light now." He looked up, tears cutting through the soot on his face. "You said I was meant to remember," he whispered. "Then I will." Outside, dawn broke. Hesitant, tender. The forest was silent, as if holding its breath. A single flower bloomed by the temple gates, white as her robe, its petals trembling in the early breeze. He smiled faintly. "Good morning, Siteng." And as the light spilled over the ruins for just a moment, he could have sworn he saw her shadow, standing beneath the trees, watching him, before it faded completely into the sun.